Welcome to the Deep Dive, your ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed. This week, we're plunging into the top 5 stories from the Observer Group newspapers of Southern California, dated July 9, 2025. Looking at these sources, what strikes me is how this week's headlines really underscore a central theme, this constant push-pull between federal power and local autonomy, and how quickly national decisions ripple down to affect everyday Californians. We'll be covering everything from, well, direct federal actions right here in our communities to significant legislative shifts in Washington, crucial corporate accountability issues, and some powerful stories of community resilience.
It is a fascinating snapshot, isn't it? This collection offers a deep look into that intricate interplay between local concerns, state initiatives, and national political currents. It really highlights how major decisions, whether they come from Sacramento or D.C., they affect communities and individual lives.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this then and see what truly stands out. Kicking off with a headline that, well, it sent shockwaves through Los Angeles, the federal show of force at MacArthur Park. What exactly happened there? And what was the actual outcome of such a visible operation?
Right. So on July 7, 2025, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE operation descended on downtown LA's MacArthur Park. And this wasn't a small-scale event. It was supported by approximately 90 California National Guard troops. Witnesses described a veritable military-style sweep. We're talking a convoy of black tactical vehicles, armored vans, masked agents on horseback forming a perimeter.
Wow.
And even a Department of Homeland Security helicopter hovering overhead around 10:30 a.m.
But despite all that, the reports said no actual arrests.
That's the strange part. Despite this huge overt display, journalists and bystanders reported observing no actual detentions in DHS. They declined to confirm any arrests, just saying they don't comment on ongoing enforcement operations. So this lack of confirmed detentions, despite the massive presence, it really prompted questions about the true purpose,
And Mayor Karen Bass's response was immediate and very public, wasn't it? I heard she personally went right to the scene.
She did, yeah. She was alerted while actually en route to another event, and she rerouted straight to MacArthur Park, still dressed in her pale green suit. She confronted federal agents directly, demanded they leave. She was even recorded in a live exchange on the phone, pressing a senior Border Patrol chief, asking, "Can you leave ASAP?" Mayor Bass unequivocally condemned the operation. She branded it outrageous and un-American and a political stunt intended, she said, to spread fear among immigrant families. She was particularly concerned about children. A summer camp was abruptly interrupted, kids funneled indoors, and worried families in the park were needlessly traumatized. This incident really brought that federal-local tension right to a head. It showed how a federal action can just directly destabilize a community's sense of safety.
And that feeling, that sentiment, was clearly shared by community leaders, too.
Oh, absolutely. City Council member Eunices Hernandez, whose district includes Westlake, called MacArthur Park the Ellis Island of the West Coast. And she warned, when you see what's happening here, we are the canary in the coal mine, basically urging other cities to pay attention.
The canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Powerful image.
Yeah. And Council President Marquise Harris Dawson went even further. He likened the scene to a staged video, suggesting the agents were more concerned with optics, saying it looked like a staging for a TikTok video.
A TikTok video.
Right. It just highlights this local perception that the whole thing was more about political messaging than, actual substantive enforcement.
So this wasn't just some local LA issue. It clearly escalated national tensions. What did those leaked Army memos reveal about the operation's real intent?
Well, internal Army memos that got leaked to the press described the effort as a show of presence, and it was termed Operation Excalibur, the stated aim, to demonstrate federal capacity to act in immigrant-heavy urban areas. They even warned of possible MS-13 gang threats as part of the justification. But this immediate escalation of national tensions over sanctuary policies led Governor Gavin Newsom to condemn it as an abuse of federal might. It really suggests a strategic use of federal power to send a message, rather than primarily for law enforcement outcomes. And it puts California, with its sanctuary policies, directly in the crosshairs.
Okay, so from that visible federal presence in Los Angeles, let's pivot now to a different kind of federal action, one that carries massive implications, especially for California. President Trump's budget and spending bill. This seems to be shaping up to be quite a significant legislative shift, doesn't it?
It absolutely is a huge shift. The Republican-controlled U.S. Senate passed President Trump's budget bill, and it needed a tie-breaking vote from Vice President J.D. Vance. That alone highlights its partisan nature. And this legislation includes what's been characterized as the largest cut to food assistance in history. That's a direct quote.
The largest cut ever.
Ever. And it threatens healthcare coverage for over 15 million Americans. Some sources even cite 16 million. The sheer scale of these proposed cuts to social safety nets is pretty unprecedented.
This bill sounds like it has incredibly far-reaching consequences. Can you break down some of the most impactful components for us? What exactly do they mean for the average American?
Certainly. Well, for starters, this bill proposes repealing the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been central to a lot of clean energy initiatives. It also cuts the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHHAPS. That's a vital program providing low-cost health coverage to children.
Right.
On the revenue side, it extends the 2017 tax cuts, which, as you know, have disproportionately benefited wealthier individuals and corporations. Furthermore, it overhauls Medicaid and food stamp eligibility. It adds new paperwork requirements that are likely to reduce access for many vulnerable individuals and families. Just make it harder.
More bureaucracy.
Exactly. It also phases out green energy tax credits. And according to most estimates, it adds an estimated $4.5 trillion to the national debt.
$4.5 trillion.
Yeah. So in essence, it's a bill that shifts resources away from social programs and environmental initiatives towards tax breaks, leading to, well, significant increases in the national debt.
And the opposition to this bill has been incredibly vocal. What are some of the key criticisms being leveled against it?
Oh, the criticism has been sharp and widespread. Jotaka Eddy of Win with Black Women stated it reverses so much progress, specifically referencing the reduction of childhood poverty under the previous administration. Senators Mark Warner and Angela Alsobrooks condemned it as cruel and callous. They characterized it as a partisan megabit designed to give massive tax breaks to his billionaire donors and gutting betrayal of working-class Americans.
Not strong words.
Very strong. This framing really highlights a fundamental ideological divide over economic policy and, who ultimately benefits from federal spending.
For California specifically, Governor Newsom's office has outlined some truly staggering estimated impacts. What do those numbers tell us?
Yeah, according to the governor's office, California stands to lose an estimated $28.4 billion from federal Medicaid support.
Billion, with a B.
Billion, with a B. This cut could risk health coverage for millions and severely threaten the financial stability of hospitals and health clinics statewide. It's huge. They also project that 686,000 California jobs could be lost due to the rollback of those clean energy tax credits.
Wow. Almost 700,000 jobs.
Right. And beyond that, the bill would hit middle-class families through higher childcare costs, limited access to financial aid for college, and food assistance cuts that could impact 3 million Americans across the nation, not just California. This really illustrates how broad federal legislation can disproportionately impact states like California with large populations and existing social safety nets.
And Governor Newsom himself didn't mince words about this bill.
No, his criticism was indeed unequivocal. Governor Newsom called the signed bill a tragedy for the American people and a complete moral failure. He stated it cements Trump's legacy of a more unequal, more indebted, and more dangerous America. His strong language signals a clear ideological battleground between California's progressive policies and the federal direction.
And this federal action also ripples into California's education sector. Superintendent Tony Thurmond, flanked by education leaders, announced that California and other states are actually suing the federal government over $811 million in federal education cuts. What's the basis of this lawsuit? What programs are at risk?
They're calling it an illegal action. They argue it threatens critical after-school programs, teacher training initiatives, and essential tech support services for schools. This lawsuit really underscores the state's determination to fight back against federal policy decisions that they believe undermine core services, especially in areas like education where federal funding plays such a significant role.
Now, it's important to note, though, that despite the overall party line vote in the Senate, 3 Republican senators, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, and Thom Tillis, voted against the budget bill. What does that dissent mean? Does it signal anything for the bill's path forward in the House, or maybe for the broader inter-party dynamics within the Republican Party?
Well, that dissent, even though it's small, it is significant. It suggests potential fault lines within the Republican caucus, indicating that even with that tie-breaking vote, there isn't universal alignment on these pretty drastic cuts. For the bill's path in the House, it could signal that the Speaker might face challenges rallying all members, especially maybe those from more moderate districts or districts with significant constituents impacted by the cuts.
Right.
It also highlights the continued struggle within the Republican Party to present a completely unified front, particularly on issues with such direct public impact. It's something to watch.
Okay, shifting focus now to a corporate story, but one with really broad social implications. Target's ongoing diversity challenges. What's the current situation for the retailer there?
Well, Target is facing what's described as worsening financial and reputational fallout. And this is due to a national selective buying and public education program. This program was launched by the Black Press of America and other national and local leaders in direct response to Target's decision to end several of its diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI efforts.
Right, the DEI rollback.
Exactly. So this is a classic case of corporate policy meeting consumer advocacy and, well, the market reacting quite strongly.
And there was that publicly reported secret meeting between Target CEO Brian Cornell and the Congressional Black Caucus Diversity Task Force. What actually came out of that meeting? Did anything change?
Well, according to CBC Chair Yvette Clarke, Target's explanations fell woefully short. That was her assessment. She emphasized that Black consumers contribute overwhelmingly to the economy and Target's bottom line, asserting they deserve businesses that publicly share our values without sacrificing our dignity.
Publicly share our values.
Yeah. Her statement, "It's no longer acceptable to deliver promises to our communities in private without also demonstrating those values publicly," really puts the onus on Target to make visible commitments, not just talk behind closed doors. Now, Cornell's public comments exiting the meeting were, well, he said it was helpful to have meetings like this and that they would continue to evolve our thinking.
Okay. Standard corporate speak.
Kind of. But he also rather controversially claimed that the ongoing boycott was not a big area of focus. He stated they were focused on running a great business each and every day.
Ooh, that probably didn't go over well.
No. It suggests a real disconnect between how the company views the situation and how its critics perceive it. Not a big area of focus versus billions lost in market value.
Right. So what exactly are these community leaders and organizations spearheaded by Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, Jr. of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the NNPA? What are they demanding from Target? What are their key asks?
They've outlined some pretty clear demands. First, they want Target to restore and expand its stated commitment to do business with local community-owned businesses, and that includes the Black press specifically. Beyond that, they're demanding a significant increase in investment in Black-owned businesses and media, historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, Black-owned banks, national Black church denominations, and various grassroots and local organizations.
So it's not just about internal DEI programs.
Not at all. It's about shifting their actual business practices to support Black-owned enterprises and institutions much more broadly, a systemic change, really.
And the financial impact on Target is quite tangible, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're seeing real numbers associated with this boycott and pressure campaign.
Indeed, very real numbers. Target's Q1 2025 net sales fell 2.8% to $23.85 billion compared to the same period last year. Comparable store sales dropped 3.8%, and importantly, in-store foot traffic slid 5.7%. Fewer people are going into the stores.
And the stock price.
The company's stock recently traded around $103.85. That's a significant drop from roughly $145 before the controversy really escalated. That translates to a loss of over $12 billion in market value.
$12 billion. That's definitely more than not a big area of focus.
You'd think so. This tangible financial impact really highlights not just the power of collective consumer action, but also the increasing risk companies face when perceived values misalignment conflicts with consumer loyalty. Especially in today's socially conscious marketplace. It really suggests that DEI commitments aren't just, ethical choices anymore. They're critical business imperatives in today's environment.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move to California-specific legislative efforts now focused on social justice, specifically the state's reparations bills. Can you update us on their progress? Where do they stand?
Yes, we've seen some significant progress recently for Senate Bill, or SB 437 and SB 518. Both were authored by Senator Akilah Weber Pearson. These bills passed the Assembly Judiciary Committee on July 1st with a 9-3 vote. So moving forward, they are part of the California Legislative Black Caucus's Road to Repair 2025 Priority Bill package. The aim, as Senator Wilbur Pearson put it, is addressing enduring harms of slavery and systemic racism right here in California.
Okay, so can you specify what each of these bills actually aims to do?
Oh,
SB 437 and SB 518?
Sure. SB 437 primarily addresses eligibility for descendants of enslaved people, and it directs the California State University System, the CSU, to develop a lineage validation methodology. Basically, how do you prove lineage?
Got it. And SB 518?
SB 518 implements recommendations from the California Reparations Task Force by establishing a specific bureau for descendants of American slavery within the Department of Justice, the DOJ. So one focuses on defining who is eligible, and the other focuses on setting up the infrastructure for implementation within the state government.
It's interesting, though, that even as these bills move forward, there are criticisms coming from some advocates. What are their main concerns?
Yeah, there have been criticisms, notably from Chris Lodgson of the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, or CJEC. He expressed displeasure over what he called competing processes for genealogical verification, having both the DOJ and the CSU involved in figuring out lineage. He warned this only guarantees delay, bureaucracy, and confusion.
Two different systems trying to do the same thing.
Potentially. And this really points to a deeper challenge in these kinds of legislative efforts. Even when there is a consensus on the need for justice, the how of implementing it, the process itself, can become a battleground. It can often lead to unintended bureaucratic hurdles that could actually undermine the very goals of the legislation. It's a reminder that, good intentions and policies still require really meticulous execution.
That makes sense. Process matters. Okay, beyond the legislative halls and corporate boardrooms, these broader shifts also impact areas like college sports, and that's a topic touching millions of families. A recent ruling has fundamentally changed the landscape for student athletes. What's the latest here?
Yeah, this is a big one. Last month, a landmark federal court ruling in the House v. NCAA case approved a settlement. And this settlement allows colleges nationwide to pay student athletes directly starting July 1st.
Directly pay them. That's a massive shift.
Huge shift from the traditional amateurism model. It includes nearly $2.8 billion in retroactive payments for Division A athletes who competed between 2016 and the present. And looking forward, future annual caps on payments could reach approximately $20.5 million per school by the 2025-26 academic year. It's a complete game changer for the financial model of college athletics.
So on the surface, this sounds like a win for student athletes, right? Getting paid. But former California State Senator Stephen Bradford, who actually co-authored California's historic SB 206, the first law allowing college athletes to profit from name, image, and likeness, or NIL, he voiced strong opposition to this federal ruling. Why is he against it?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Bradford called it a wrong decision. His reasoning is that he wanted athletes to negotiate directly with third parties for their NIL rights, not have the colleges control the payments. His primary concern is that this ruling hands colleges too much power. He thinks it allows them to manipulate these athletes' decisions about their education, future, and finances.
Okay, so control is the issue.
Exactly. He warned it could deepen inequalities between institutions, too. The big-name schools with deeper pockets could just lure athletes away, potentially undermining fairness and even educational integrity. Now, NCAA President Charlie Baker, on the other hand, said the agreement brings clarity and allows schools to regain control. So you see the differing perspectives there. Bradford emphasizes the potential for new power imbalances.
Right, which leads to the central question that arises from this ruling. Should student athletes now be considered employees with the right to unionize? What are the arguments on both sides of that fundamental debate?
That is the critical and still unresolved question. On one side, advocates for employee status argue, well, if athletes are now being directly paid by colleges, performing work, generating significant revenue, they should have the same labor rights as other employees.
Including collective bargaining.
Including the right to collective bargaining. This would give them more power over their working conditions, health, safety, their financial future, everything. On the other side, opponents argue that granting employee status would fundamentally alter the nature of college sports. It could lead to union disputes, increased administrative burdens for universities, and really blur the lines between amateur and professional athletics. They contend it could jeopardize the educational mission of universities and the sort of unique character of college sports. It's a really deep debate pitting labor rights against the long-held traditions of collegiate amateurism.
Definitely something that's going to continue evolving. Okay, let's dive into some crucial state-level data now. The California Department of Justice, the DOJ, recently released its new report on police use of force. What were the key findings in that report?
Well, the Use of Force Incident Reporting 2024 report revealed a pretty stark finding. Black Californians, who make up just 5.7% of the state's population, accounted for a disproportionate 19.4% of civilians involved in use of force incidents. And that's incidents resulting in serious injury or death or the discharge of a firearm.
Wow, 5.7% of the population, but nearly 20% of those incidents.
Exactly. To compare, Hispanic individuals represented 50.2% of incidents, while being 40.3% of the population. And white individuals accounted for 25.8% of incidents, while being 34.7% of the population. This data really underscores persistent disparities in how force is applied across different demographic groups in California.
And the report also noted officer involvement, right?
Yes, it did. It stated that 115 officers were involved in these 581 incidents in 2024. And it noted that 20% of those officers were reportedly injured during the incidents. Attorney General Rob Bonta emphasized the importance of transparency with this data. He encouraged local partners and law enforcement to review it to recommit to taking action. He stressed that this data ensures policymakers and law enforcement have the tools they need to make informed decisions that keep millions of Californians safe. So the report aims to provide a factual basis for policy discussions and accountability efforts.
Okay, pivoting now to a story of California's rich Black history and resilience. Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park. Tell us about this place. What makes it so special?
Oh, this is a truly remarkable place down in Irla California. It was founded way back in 1908 by Colonel Allen Allensworth. He was the highest-ranking Black officer of his time in the U.S. Army. The park itself symbolizes Black determination, self-sufficiency, and cultural pride. It's not just some dusty historical site. It really represents a powerful vision of self-governance and community building from over a century ago.
And the park is still a vibrant center for events today, I understand.
It certainly is. Very active. The annual Rededication Festival is coming up on Saturday, October 11th, 2025. It runs from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It features cultural performances, educational exhibits, food, inspiring speakers. They also recently hosted a memorable Juneteenth celebration back on June 14th with engaging speakers, live entertainment, and community activities.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, these festivals, they don't just honor the past. They also educate and empower future generations, ensuring that the powerful story of Colonel Allensworth and this pioneering Black community continues to inspire people. It's a powerful reminder, really, of how historical sites can continue to serve as living monuments for education and community building, actively connecting generations to their heritage.
Absolutely. Okay, let's turn to another significant development for California families. Governor Newsom's recent move on housing. He just signed a reform package that scales back the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. Why was this seen as such a big win for him?
Well, CEQA has been controversial for a long time. Until now, it required these really extensive environmental reviews for new development projects. Newsom and housing advocates have long argued that this process delayed projects for years, sometimes decades, through costly lawsuits and lengthy reviews.
The infamous CEQA lawsuits.
Exactly. So the new law, which includes several bills like AB 609, AB 306, SB 131, and AB 130 aims to speed up housing project approvals, especially in dense urban areas near transit. The goal is to streamline reviews, lower construction costs, and ultimately increase the housing supply. It's a direct response, really, to California's severe housing crisis.
And the urgency for this kind of legislation is pretty clear when you just look at the housing numbers, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Newsom himself has often stated, we have too much demand chasing too little supply, and the fact that San Jose's median single-family home price surpassed $2 million last year.
$2 million. Median price.
Median price. It just underscores the severe affordability crisis facing Californians. So this reform is an attempt to address that bottleneck directly to get more housing built faster.
Now, it's worth noting that while housing advocates might see this as a clear win, there has been some opposition, particularly from environmental groups. What are their concerns about rolling back CEQA?
Right, there are definite concerns. Environmental groups like the Sierra Club warned of destructive consequences for environmental justice communities and endangered species. They argue that easing environmental reviews, even with guardrails, could harm vulnerable populations and sensitive natural habitats.
So a potential downside.
A potential downside they're highlighting. There's also skepticism from some planning experts, like Bill Fulton, who predicts maybe an incremental rather than a boom in development. He suggests the impact might not be as transformative as advocates hope. And of course, Republicans, for their part, have criticized Newsom for acting too late on the housing crisis, framing it as a long-standing issue that should have been addressed much sooner. So you see varied reactions highlighting the complex trade-offs involved.
And here's a kind of surprising strategic move, perhaps. This housing overhaul comes just as the state is scaling back other programs, like a planned healthcare expansion for undocumented immigrants, to close a $12 billion budget gap. Newsom actually framed the housing reforms as a test of trust in government. What's the thinking there? What's at play?
Yeah, it's a calculated decision, isn't it? It seems Newsom is attempting to demonstrate governmental efficiency and responsiveness on a really critical issue like housing, even as the state navigates significant fiscal challenges. By coupling a major reform like this with budget cuts in other areas, he's trying to project a message of maybe fiscal responsibility and prioritization. We're tackling the big problems even when money is tight.
Right. A strategic balancing act.
Exactly. And this strategic pairing also seems to tie into his broader narrative. We saw it in his recent July 4th message on equality and opportunity, and now with his upcoming tour of rural South Carolina.
Okay, tell us more about that South Carolina tour.
Mm.
It really does seem like California's state-level policies and political figures are increasingly playing a role on the national stage, sometimes signaling broader political ambitions, perhaps.
Well, Newsom centered his Independence Day message on America's ongoing fight for equality. He stated that relentless attacks across the country try to weaken and erase our fundamental rights and freedoms, and he pledged California will never back down from the fight. Very national framing. Then, almost immediately, the South Carolina Democratic Party announced his two-day tour of rural South Carolina, happening July 8th and 9th. SCDP Chair Christelle Spain explicitly said she sees it as building partnerships, uplifting communities, and showing rural voters that they aren't forgotten in towns that have been hollowed out by decades of Republican control.
So, taking the California message directly into a key early primary state.
Precisely. This isn't just a local visit. It's Newsom connecting California's progressive values, or his framing of them, with national political struggles. He's engaging directly with voters in a place far from California. This kind of outreach certainly suggests a broader political strategy, looking beyond just governing California. It's definitely fueling speculation.
Well, that was quite the deep dive into Southern California's week, and really the nation's week in many ways. When you pull it all together, it's clear we've seen this really dense tapestry of interconnected events, from, direct federal intervention in local communities like MacArthur Park to those high-stakes budget battles with huge national implications, the corporate accountability showdowns like with Target, and the intricate efforts to address historical and contemporary social justice issues like reparations and use of force data.
Yeah, this deep dive truly illustrates how seemingly disparate events are often deeply interconnected. They reveal these underlying tensions and critical shifts in power, in policy, and ultimately in community well-being. Knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied. And this week's news really highlights how critical thinking is just essential in this world of constant information overload.
Exactly. And that's why these deeper dives are so crucial, right? To move past the headlines, the sound bites, and really try to understand the full context, the different perspectives, and the direct impacts on people's lives. So as you go about your week, maybe think about this. What does it mean for individuals and communities to navigate a world where the pursuit of justice, economic stability, and fundamental rights increasingly involves this really complex dance between local needs, state-level initiatives, and a rapidly shifting national political landscape? How might understanding these interconnected forces empower you to engage more effectively with the issues shaping your own world?